The year was 1929, and the world was drunk on success. Jazz filled the air, champagne spilled over marble tables, and everyone believed the party would never end. New York glowed like a kingdom of gold, a city built on credit, confidence, and the illusion of endless growth. Stocks were climbing higher than ever, and ordinary people, farmers, factory workers, even students, had become overnight investors. The American dream was alive, unstoppable, and untouchable, until it wasn't. It started with whispers on Wall Street. A few sharp minds noticed numbers that didn't make sense, stocks that soared without earnings, companies valued at fantasy levels, banks lending money they didn't have. But the crowd didn't care. They were too busy chasing quick riches to see the cracks forming under their feet. Then came October 29th, the day history calls Black Tuesday. The illusion shattered. In a single day, the market lost billions. Panic swept through the streets like wildfire. People rushed to banks, desperate to withdraw savings that no longer existed. Men screamed on trading floors. Women wept on sidewalks. The sound of wealth collapsing wasn't thunder. It was silence. The silence of disbelief. The silence that follows the death of a dream. Factories shut down. Banks locked their doors. Farmers lost land. Families lost homes. Across America, bread lines stretched around corners, filled with men who once wore suits and owned stocks. Children starved, fathers disappeared, and entire cities turned into graveyards of ambition. The Great Depression had arrived, and with it, the greatest transfer of wealth in modern history. Because while millions fell to ruin, a few were watching from the shadows. They saw something others couldn't. That chaos wasn't just destruction, it was rebirth. And those few would become the new rulers of a broken world. Hit that subscribe button, because this isn't just a story about loss, it's a story about the people who built empires while the world burned. Let's start with John D. Rockefeller. Even at the height of the crash, when panic ruled and fortunes vanished overnight, Rockefeller was calm. He told reporters, "These are days when many are discouraged, but this too shall pass." He didn't say it for comfort. He said it because he knew the truth. He'd seen panic before. He'd built Standard Oil during chaos, and he understood the secret the rich still live by today. When everyone sells in fear, wealth goes on sale. While banks collapsed, Rockefeller's companies bought assets for pennies on the dollar. Railroads, land, and factories, all scooped up at fractions of their worth. When confidence returned years later, those same investments multiplied in value 100 times over. Rockefeller's calm in crisis wasn't luck, it was discipline, the kind forged by years of seeing opportunity where others saw ruin. And he wasn't alone. Henry Ford, the man who put America on wheels, faced devastation too. Car sales crashed, factories stood silent, but instead of quitting, Ford doubled down on innovation. He restructured production, cut costs, and prepared for the comeback he knew would come. When the economy recovered, Ford emerged stronger, ready to dominate an industry that had wiped out his competitors. Then there was a man with no fortune at all, Walt Disney. In the depths of despair, while millions starved, Disney borrowed money to create something the world had never seen before, an animated feature film called Snow White. Everyone thought he was insane. Investors laughed, banks refused him. But he saw something deeper, the hunger for hope. When Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered in 1937, it became the first full-length animated movie in history, and a global success that turned Disney into a legend. 3 men, 3 different paths. One truth: crisis creates kings. While the masses froze in fear, these men acted. While others waited for permission to believe again, they built. That's the difference between those who survive collapse and those who own it. See, here's the real lesson no one teaches. Recessions don't create poverty. They reveal it. They strip away illusion. They expose who was swimming naked when the tide went out and who had prepared for the storm. During the Great Depression, the people who had cash, courage, and conviction didn't just survive. They multiplied their wealth. It wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It was mindset. The same markets that destroyed millions rewarded the few who refused to panic. Those who kept buying when others sold. Those who studied history instead of fearing it. Those who understood that money never disappears. It simply changes hands. And that's what the Great Depression truly was. The largest transfer of wealth in history. A shift from the emotional to the strategic, from the dreamers to the disciplined. The world may have gone dark, but for those who knew where to look, the glow of opportunity was everywhere. So when the next crash comes, and it will, remember this story. Because the rich don't run from chaos. They wait for it. When the market collapsed, most people froze. They watched their savings vanish, their jobs disappear, and their homes sold at auction. But for a rare few, the Great Depression wasn't a graveyard. It was a battlefield. And battlefields create generals. They didn't see collapse. They saw clearance. They didn't see fear. They saw opportunity. One of them was Jesse Livermore, a man whose story defines the fine line between madness and genius. Before the crash, Livermore was already a legend on Wall Street, known as the boy plunger, for his daring bets against the market when everyone else was buying. In 1929, while America was blinded by greed, Livermore was consumed by the numbers. He saw the unsustainable debt, the rampant leverage, the mass delusion. So while the crowd was drunk on easy profits, he quietly, meticulously built his position, shorting the market. When Black Tuesday hit and panic ripped through Wall Street, Livermore made over $100 million in a single day. That's more than $1 billion in today's money. But here is the dark side of that victory. Even those who win in chaos pay a price. The immense pressure, the paranoia, the guilt of profiting while the world burned. It consumed him. Livermore's story is both a warning and a weapon. It shows that the power to predict a collapse is real, but it demands a discipline stronger than greed and an emotional fortitude that few possess. And then there was Joseph P. Kennedy, the father of a future president. While most investors were desperately praying for a miracle, Kennedy was methodically building a legacy. He used the crash to buy up companies and real estate at fire sale prices. He understood what few others did. True wealth isn't about luck, it's about positioning. When everyone else is desperate to sell, the few with patience and liquidity get to own the future. Kennedy bought when fear was at its absolute peak, and when the economy eventually began its slow recovery, he sold with surgical precision. He walked away not just rich, but powerful. So powerful, in fact, that he would eventually become the first chairman of the SEC, helping rewrite the very rules that had allowed the crash to happen in the first place. Think about that journey. From chaos to control. From trader to regulator. That is what power looks like when you understand the system instead of being crushed by it. Meanwhile, America's industrial backbone was being reforged in the fires of the Depression. Take DuPont, the chemical giant. They saw factories closing all around them and competitors failing left and right. But instead of retreating, they innovated. They poured their resources into developing new products like nylon and cellophane. Entire industries that didn't even exist before the crisis. So by the time the economic recovery began, DuPont wasn't just surviving, it was dominating. This pattern repeats itself throughout history. Chaos clears the board, but it doesn't destroy the game. It resets it. And those who understand that fundamental principle don't hide from downturns, they prepare for them. If you're still watching, and I hope you are, hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because this next truth is what separates the poor from the powerful. The rich plan for a collapse. The poor pray it never comes. The difference isn't intelligence, it's perspective. The average person saves for safety. The wealthy saved for opportunity. When the Depression hit, prices plummeted by 80% or more. Stocks, land, gold, even art, everything went on sale. For most people, it was an unparalleled disaster. But for those holding cash or credit, it was the greatest sale in history. Imagine buying skyscrapers for pennies on the dollar, entire companies for nickels, or vast tracts of farmland for less than the price of a car. That's exactly what happened. These people weren't villains or simple opportunists. They were visionaries who understood that destruction and creation are the same force, just seen from different sides of fear. As Rockefeller himself once said, "The way to make money is to buy when blood is running in the streets." He didn't mean it as an act of cruelty. He meant it as a call for courage, the courage to act when everyone else is paralyzed by fear. It's the very same principle that has created fortunes after every major crisis since, from the dot-com bust of 2000, to the Great Recession of 2008, to the pandemic crash of 2020. History doesn't change. Only the names do. So you have to ask yourself, when the next collapse comes, will you be begging for mercy, or will you be buying the future? Because the Great Depression wasn't just a story about loss. It was a story about leverage, innovation, and dominance. The rich didn't avoid the storm. They built their ships specifically for it. They used cold, hard strategy where others used raw emotion. They bought fear when it was cheap, and sold confidence when it was expensive, turning the ashes of the old world into new empires. By 1935, as America slowly crawled out of despair, a new generation of millionaires stood atop the rubble. Kennedy, Ford, Rockefeller, DuPont, even Disney, all emerged wealthier, wiser, and more powerful than before. They didn't wait for permission. They used the collapse itself as currency. And that's the ultimate secret. Crisis doesn't create wealth. It simply reveals who was prepared to seize it all along. When the dust settled after 1929, most people believed the American dream was dead. Families huddled in shacks built from scrap wood. Farmers plowed land that no longer fed them. Men in tattered suits lined up for bread that ran out before their turn. To the world, the future was gone. But to a few visionaries, the future was just beginning. Because when everything breaks, the rules break with it. And when the rules disappear, the brave build new ones. That's what Procter & Gamble understood. Before the Depression, they were just another soap and candle company. But when the economy crashed and advertising budgets vanished, P&G made a move no one expected. They spent more. They launched a daily radio show to entertain families who couldn't afford theater tickets, and between the drama and the laughter, they subtly promoted their products. That show became The Guiding Light, one of the first soap operas in history. It didn't just sell soap, it built connection. While competitors hid, P&G expanded. By 1935, they had doubled their market share. In a world drowning in despair, they didn't sell products. They sold comfort, consistency, and familiarity. And when the economy revived, their name was written into the foundation of modern marketing. Then came Boeing, a small airplane manufacturer struggling to stay alive in an era when most Americans couldn't afford bread, let alone air travel. Orders dried up, competitors folded. But Boeing refused to stop innovating. Instead, they poured resources into technology, faster engines, better materials, new designs. In 1933, while the world was still clawing its way out of the pit, Boeing introduced the Model 247, the world's first modern airliner. It was sleek, fast, revolutionary, and though few could buy it then, it set the standard for the next 50 years of aviation. When the world recovered, Boeing wasn't rebuilding. It was leading. This is the lesson most people miss. Success isn't about timing the recovery. It's about building through the collapse. And then there was IBM. In 1930, the company's future looked grim. Business machines were a luxury, and luxuries had no place in an economy of soup lines and unemployment. But IBM's leader, Thomas J. Watson Sr., didn't see doom. He saw destiny. He ordered the company to keep developing, to hire the best talent they could find, even while cutting executive salaries to survive. Watson's gamble was pure insanity to the outside world. But in 1935, the U.S. government passed the Social Security Act, requiring a massive new system to track millions of citizens' earnings. IBM had been preparing for this moment all along, with machines ready to handle exactly that kind of data. Overnight, they went from struggling to essential. Watson had bet on the future and won. History remembers the collapse, but not the construction that followed. The Great Depression didn't just destroy, it forced evolution. It punished the reckless, yes, but it also forged the resilient. While the world focused on what was lost, these pioneers built what would come next. Entertainment, aviation, technology, manufacturing. Industries that defined the 20th century were born from ruin. Take Walt Disney. Snow White didn't just rescue a bankrupt studio. It proved that hope was still a currency the world would pay for. It inspired millions to dream again, and in doing so, Disney built more than an animation company. He built an emotion economy. These men and women weren't immune to fear. They were simply guided by something stronger: vision. They understood that crisis compresses time. 10 years of progress can happen in one if you dare to move while others freeze. By 1939, when the world stood at the edge of another global war, America's industrial machine was roaring again, powered by companies born or reborn during the Depression. P&G's products filled every home. Boeing's planes dominated the skies. IBM's machines powered governments and corporations alike. The same decade that starved millions also created the backbone of modern civilization. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. Because every generation faces its own collapse. In 1929, it was stocks. In 2008, it was housing. Tomorrow, it might be digital. But history rewards the same few. Those who study fear instead of running from it. The Great Depression didn't create millionaires by magic. It created them through clarity. When the noise vanished, when greed, hype, and illusion all burned away, what was left were the people who understood that money isn't destroyed in a crash. It simply moves. And the question isn't if it will move again, it's toward whom. So when the next downturn comes, don't curse it. Study it. Because somewhere in that chaos is your empire waiting to be built. When the smoke of the Great Depression finally began to clear, something extraordinary was revealed. Not just the ruins of what had fallen, but the foundations of what was now rising. While millions waited for life to return to normal, a select few realized there was no going back. The old world was gone. The ones who thrived didn't rebuild it. They replaced it. Take John D. Rockefeller, for example. By the 1930s, the oil magnate was already the richest man in the world. But while most tycoons hid behind fortress walls of cash, Rockefeller saw a chance to do something no one else could: buy the future. During the Depression, oil companies were collapsing under debt and falling demand. Prices were at rock bottom, and Rockefeller's empire, through Standard Oil's successors, quietly acquired controlling stakes in pipelines, refineries, and production facilities for pennies on the dollar. He didn't chase wealth, he absorbed it. And when the world's engine started roaring again, his influence stretched from Texas to the Middle East. It wasn't luck, it was patience. Crisis gave him the leverage to turn money into power, and power into permanence. Henry Ford, on the other hand, was a different kind of builder. By 1929, his cars had transformed America. But when the Depression hit, auto sales fell by more than 75%. Competitors went bankrupt. Banks begged for bailouts. Ford refused them all. Instead, he doubled down on efficiency, cutting waste, refining processes, and launching the now legendary Ford V8. It was fast, powerful, and, despite the economy, affordable enough to keep the American dream alive. Ford didn't just make cars, he made momentum. He understood that even in a depression, people didn't stop dreaming. They just dreamed cheaper. And when prosperity returned, Ford was no longer just an industrialist. He was a symbol of progress. Then came Walt Disney. By 1937, he'd done the impossible. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered in the depths of the Depression and earned more money than any film in history at the time. Disney built his empire on faith and imagination, when the world had lost faith in itself. He borrowed heavily, risked everything, and created an entirely new market, feature-length animation. While others fought to survive, Disney invented joy. That's the quiet secret of the Great Depression's millionaires. They didn't just make money. They made meaning. Meanwhile, the DuPont family turned crisis into chemistry. The company, rooted in explosives, reinvented itself during the 1930s. They poured resources into research and innovation, discovering materials like nylon and neoprene, inventions that would go on to define post-war America. While the public tightened belts, DuPont was weaving the future of fashion, industry, and consumer goods. Each of these names, Rockefeller, Ford, Disney, DuPont, didn't just survive. They multiplied. They didn't do it through luck or chance. They did it because while the world was drowning in fear, they swam toward the current. And that's the same rule today. Every generation has its Great Depression. The markets change. The pattern doesn't. When assets fall, wealth doesn't disappear. It transfers. From the emotional to the rational. From the reactive to the prepared. From the many to the few. Because Rockefeller's heirs didn't just inherit his money, they inherited his system. A web of trusts, investments, and philanthropic arms that protected and grew wealth across generations. DuPont's descendants didn't just own a company. They became one of the most powerful financial families in history, with stakes in everything from General Motors to modern chemical giants. And Walt Disney? His empire outlived him. What began as one man's dream became a multi-trillion-dollar global brand. Decades later, in recessions, in wars, in pandemics, Disney's name still prints optimism. That's legacy. The Depression didn't just build millionaires, it built architects of time. Because when you build during chaos, your foundation is tested by fire. Your empire doesn't just stand on wealth, it stands on wisdom. The Great Depression forced its survivors to master 3 laws of power: control, patience, and adaptability. Control your emotions when others lose theirs. Be patient when the crowd panics. And adapt before anyone else knows they need to. That's what Ford did with automation. What Rockefeller did with energy. What Disney did with storytelling. And what DuPont did with invention. Each one turned crisis into a classroom. Each one taught that money is not about the moment. It's about movement. The ability to flow, pivot, and endure. When you look at today's billionaires, Buffett, Musk, Bezos, their playbooks echo the Depression titans. Buy when others sell. Invest when others retreat. Innovate when others sleep. History doesn't reward the first. It rewards the fearless. So when the world falls again, and it always will, remember this. The next empire will not be built in calm times. It will be built in chaos. And those who study history, like you're doing right now, will recognize the rhythm when it returns. They say the Great Depression ended decades ago. They're wrong. It never died. It just evolved. Its echoes live in every skyscraper, every billion-dollar logo, and every quiet boardroom decision that shapes our world. The empires forged in the fire of the 1930s didn't just survive a global collapse, they became the very system we live in today. Think about it. The oil empire that Rockefeller built now fuels every car, every ship, and every plane that moves civilization forward. His Standard Oil was broken up, sure, but its fragments simply became ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP. the arteries of global power. Every single barrel of oil pumped, every deal signed in Riyadh or Houston, carries his DNA. He didn't just drill for black gold. He drilled for generational immortality. And what about Henry Ford's factories? They became the blueprint for modern industry itself. His assembly lines didn't just build cars. They built the very concept of mass production. Today, every Tesla rolling off the line, every Boeing jet soaring through the clouds, every iPhone assembled with precision, owes a debt to Ford's obsession with efficiency and scale. His belief that machines could free humanity from poverty became the foundation of the industrial world, and eventually, the digital one. Then there's Walt Disney's dream. It never stopped at cartoons. His empire evolved from a mouse sketched on a train into a global consciousness machine. That same mouse now commands streaming platforms, news outlets, and theme parks that are practically sovereign states. In 1937, during the depths of the Depression, Disney sold hope with Snow White. In 2025, he's still selling it, packaged in pixels and nostalgia, beamed directly into billions of homes. And we can't forget the DuPonts. Their chemical innovations revolutionized materials, from the nylon stockings that changed fashion to the Kevlar that stops bullets. Today, their descendants sit on the boards of global conglomerates that touch everything: energy, defense, technology, agriculture. Their innovations built modern convenience, but their legacy built a fortress of control. What began as a strategy for survival in the 1930s became a blueprint for dominance in the 21st century. These families didn't just rebuild their fortunes. They engineered frameworks designed to lock in power for generations. They used trusts, holding companies, and diversified portfolios, financial tools designed to keep wealth moving forward even when the rest of the world is falling back. And if you look closely, you'll see the same rhythm playing out again and again. The 2008 financial crash, the 2020 pandemic. Every single time the crowd panics, the few who understand this rhythm quietly expand their reach. Warren Buffett famously said to be greedy when others are fearful. He wasn't just quoting a line. He was buying entire companies during recessions for pennies on the dollar. Elon Musk built his empires during periods of chaos and uncertainty. Jeff Bezos turned global crisis into unstoppable momentum. History doesn't just repeat itself, it compounds. The gains get bigger, the stakes get higher, and the lessons become more urgent. So if you're watching this, don't just scroll past the lesson. Because what those titans of the 1930s proved is that recessions don't destroy opportunity. They reveal it. Every empire you admire today was born from the ashes of a time when everyone else had stopped believing. You see, during the Great Depression, a profound shift occurred. It wasn't just about money, it was a transfer of mindset. The poor and the middle class were forced to think about daily survival. The rich and the visionary thought about systems. The majority sold their time for a wage. The minority bought assets for a future. And once the economic tide inevitably turned, those assets didn't just recover, they became dynasties. That is the DNA of power. It's not money, it's vision. It's the ability to see a forest when everyone else is just looking at a single struggling sapling. If you've made it this far, show some love and hit that subscribe button, because this truth isn't just history, it's prophecy. The next great collapse isn't a question of if, but when. And when it happens, it won't be the loudest voices who rise from the rubble. It'll be the most prepared. It will be the ones who saw the storm coming and instead of running for cover, started building an ark. Because every era hides a Rockefeller. Every generation has its own Disney. Every crisis conceals a creator. But most people never see the pattern. They're too busy watching the flames to study what's being forged within them. The Great Depression wasn't just a tragedy. It was a filter. It separated those who thought in days from those who thought in decades. It separated those who looked for jobs from those who built industries. It separated those who followed fear from those who followed opportunity. And if you take only one lesson away from this story, let it be this: the next era of wealth, the next generation of empires, will be built in exactly the same way. Not by those who wait for calm waters, but by those who learn to breathe underwater. Because chaos is the cradle of greatness. The world you know today, from the car you drive to the phone in your hand, from the movies you watch to the banks you trust, was built by people who refused to wait for better days. They went out and made better days. And so can you. So when the market dips next, when the headlines start screaming, when everyone you know is saying it's over, remember this: the richest people in history made their most decisive moves when the rest of the world was too scared to move at all. The Great Depression didn't end wealth. It reinvented it, and the next one will do the same. This is Blood and Fortune, where every fall hides a foundation, and every crisis is an invitation to rise. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, because our next story isn't about history. It's about the next generation of empire builders. And maybe, just maybe, that includes you. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it.